guys! So today's video is one that I've actually had in the works for a little while now, and it's something that you have probably seen before, and that is a draw this again. And the piece that I am redrawing in this video will be shown at the end in a side-by-side comparison. I also showed it briefly on this channel before when I was showing my old artwork. So this piece was from 2011. So I was 14 years old and I am 20 now. So this is a 6-year-old piece of artwork that I am redrawing. And as far as the actual execution of the piece was concerned, I did try to stay fairly true to the original. In the original, I used colored pencils and fine liners, so I did not use brush pens or watercolors or anything else that I typically do in my artwork, just because I wanted to stay as close to the original supplies-wise as I could. The supplies that I used are slightly better quality. In the original, I used Crayola colored pencils, and in this, I used Prismacolor. Although that probably has a little bit of an impact on the effect of the finished piece, I also was not using the Crayola pencils to the full extent of their capabilities. I wasn't even attempting to blend anything. I was just laying down flat color. So as far as that is concerned, a flat layer of Prismacolor would not really look that much more interesting than a flat layer of Prismacolor. So for that reason, I decided to use my Prismacolor colored pencils. Something else that I noticed about the original was the line weight. There was no variation at all. I just had a fine liner pen and I inked the entire thing in the same line width and called it a day. And I have definitely improved in that regard as well. I've realized that it's much more interesting to add variation to your line weight, and it also helps as far as depth is concerned. The reason that I chose this piece to redraw specifically was I found that it was the most interesting piece from that period of my life. A lot of the pieces in that same sketchbook are very simple. They're portraits or profiles, and there's not a whole lot of variation to them. They're just anime faces with different hair. It's really the only difference between them. But this piece was a full body, and she had some interesting clothes. And I attempted a pose. I hid her hands behind her back, as I tended to do a lot at that period of my life, but it was the most interesting piece, and that was why I decided to redraw this one specifically. I thought it had the most potential to become a finished piece that I would be proud of now. Now, the funny thing is, when I was looking at my old sketchbook, I had turned to that sketch and I looked at it and I thought, I don't know if I draw that much better than this now. And I was being overly hard on myself, as I tend to do in all areas of my life, but it is really encouraging to see them side by side and see the improvement that has happened and that I have achieved. When I look at the piece that I've created now, there are a lot of things that stand out to me as being substantially better than the first piece of artwork that I did. First and foremost, the proportions are way better. In the first piece, the feet were minuscule, way too small. The hips were really narrow, and although that is a body type, it just looked very strange the way I had drawn it. And in this piece, I feel like not only are the proportions better, but the pose is a lot better. I imagined her to be a sort of performer. I always have. And so I created a pose that I thought might be in some sort of act. I don't know if it would be dance or maybe magic. I had imagined her as a magician at some points as well. But I like her pose a lot better. It feels a lot more stage-like. It feels a lot more presentable as something that would actually be in a performance rather than something that is completely unrealistic, and nobody would ever stand with their hands behind their back in that way. Another thing that I added into this piece that wasn't really a thing in the first one were wrinkles in the clothing. In the first one, I tried a little bit of wrinkles in the scarf, but the way I had draped it around her neck was very strange, and it clung to her neck while still having wrinkles in it at the same time. Very noticeable wrinkles. So in this, I made her scarf quite a bit larger and added more folds, and I also added folds to her skinny jeans and her vest as well. There aren't very many folds in her shirt, but only because that was how I wanted it to be, rather than me being incapable of creating those folds in the clothing. Another standout thing about this piece is the hands and the fact that I actually drew them. And in the original, as I mentioned previously, was infamous for placing the hands very strategically behind the back, or in the pockets, or behind the head, or anywhere that I wouldn't need to draw them, basically. But I realized fairly recently that I was never going to get better at hands if I never tried to actually draw them. And so I am a lot more confident with my hands now, and I think it makes a substantial difference to the way the pieces look. And as I mentioned before, the shading is obviously much better because in the original I didn't have any at all. A big part of the reason for my improvement, I think, was that I never used to look up reference of any kind. I just kind of went with what I thought things looked like and hoped for the best. And that is no longer the case, and I can say that it has definitely done wonders for my art as a whole. And in addition to that, it's just a lot of practice and patience and experimentation. And that all brought me to the point of substantial improvement and hope for the future if you're worried about the way that your art looks now. I would definitely recommend doing this to anyone that feels discouraged about their artwork. If you feel like you haven't improved for a very long time, absolutely try this. Put them side by side and look at how much better you are. And I hope you all enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.